You think McDonald's sells burgers, and technically, it does. But burgers are not the reason this company became one of the most powerful businesses ever built. McDonald's has spent decades telling you a very specific story about what it is. The real story made them far richer than the public story ever could. McDonald's serves 69 million customers every single day, more than the entire population of France, every single day. But in financial terms, the customer is not the center of the system. McDonald's does need customers. The real money is made somewhere else, because McDonald's isn't primarily a restaurant company. It's one of the largest real estate empires on earth. The food gets you in the door. The land is how they make their money. Everything McDonald's has built, the family image, the franchise dream, the feel-good origin story, was designed to keep you looking at the counter, not at what's underneath it. Workers whose wages were partly subsidized by your taxes. Franchisees locked into a system they can't fully control. Food engineered not to nourish, but to make sure you come back. This video is what's underneath, and once you see it, the golden arches are never going to look quite the same. Every durable brand is built on a story, and McDonald's story is genuinely compelling. Two brothers, a burger stand in the California desert. A scrappy salesman who bets everything on a new idea. It's the kind of founding myth America loves to tell, but the version you know skips the most important part. Dick and Mac McDonald opened their first restaurant in 1940. By 1948, they had invented something called the Speedy Service System, a kitchen design so efficient it became the blueprint for every fast food operation that followed. When Kroc finally bought them out in 1961, he paid them $2.7 million. A fixed fee, no ongoing royalties, no share of what followed. Within a decade, McDonald's was worth hundreds of millions. Ray Kroc didn't discover McDonald's. He sold the milkshake machines. He was a vendor, a supplier, a road salesman. He walked in as one thing. He walked out having seen the future. And eventually, he made sure that future belonged to him. Kroc franchised the brand, scaled it aggressively, then maneuvered the brothers out of their own company. Their agreement included a clause for ongoing royalties. Kroc made sure it was unenforceable. Dick McDonald later described him, paraphrasing, as the most selfish man he'd ever met. The brothers got $2.7 million and walked away. The system they invented became a $200 billion empire. McDonald's still uses the brothers' story in its marketing today. The story is in the logo. It's in the lore. It's just not in the profit. So if the origin story is more complicated than it sounds, what is McDonald's actually built on? The answer might be the most counterintuitive business fact you'll hear today. And honestly, as a business move, it was brilliant. Every time you see a McDonald's off a highway exit, the sign, the parking lot, the building, the land under all of it, chances are McDonald's controls far more of that picture than you'd ever guess. McDonald's most recent annual report listed property assets at approximately $39 billion. For context, that real estate portfolio alone is larger than the entire market cap of most Fortune 500 companies. In the 1950s, McDonald's hired a finance strategist named Harry Sonneborn. He looked at the operation and said something that changed everything. "We are not in the food business. We are in the real estate business." The restaurants exist so franchisees can generate revenue, which makes it possible for them to pay McDonald's rent. That was the whole model. And this is where the whole thing changes. McDonald's doesn't need your Big Mac to be profitable. It needs the franchisee to keep paying rent. Rent that arrives whether the restaurant is doing well or quietly struggling to break even. The franchisee carries the operational risk. McDonald's collects the rent. The next time you pull into a McDonald's, you're not just buying lunch. You're stepping into a real estate business disguised as a restaurant. But the franchisees understand the deal, right? They're independent operators, entrepreneurs, people who chose this. McDonald's has always positioned the franchise as ownership. Imagine wiring over $2 million for that, right? And then discovering the rent, the rules, the menu, the equipment mandates, and even the advertising fund are still controlled by someone else. That's what the inside of it actually looks like. Opening a McDonald's franchise costs up to $2.3 million up front. Then, 4 to 5% of gross monthly sales paid to McDonald's on top of rent. Plus, mandatory contributions to a national advertising fund the franchisee has no vote in. And when McDonald's mandates a remodel, which it does periodically, franchisees have reported costs of $300,000 to $750,000 per location. Not optional, not subsidized, just required. The genius of McDonald's was figuring out how to sell the idea of independence inside one of the most tightly controlled operating systems in modern business. A franchisee can run a location doing millions in annual revenue and still barely break even because every fee is structured to collect before the franchisee does. In 2017, a group of franchisees formed their own organization to push back against McDonald's corporate. They called it the National Owners Association. Their complaints, those mandatory equipment upgrades, declining margins, a corporate structure that treated them as interchangeable units. This wasn't a fringe group. It was the majority of McDonald's franchise owners, publicly, in writing, against the company they'd paid millions to join. McDonald's sells the franchise as ownership. In practice, it often looks more like paying a significant sum for the right to operate inside someone else's system, under someone else's rules, on someone else's land. And the franchise story gets more complicated still, because critics argue the system wasn't just tilted financially. They argue it was tilted along racial lines, and the pattern they described is difficult to ignore. In 2020, a group of Black McDonald's franchisees filed a class action lawsuit. According to the complaint, Black owners were disproportionately placed in lower-performing locations, stores in lower-income, higher-crime neighborhoods, while paying the same corporate fees as franchisees in more profitable areas. The lawsuit sought damages in excess of $1 billion. The complaint further alleged less corporate support, unequal access to renovation financing, and higher exit rates from the system. McDonald's denied the allegations, but critics noted the pattern, if accurate, wasn't the work of one bad actor. The structure would have had to allow it. McDonald's built its brand on accessibility. The friendly neighborhood restaurant, present in every community, and critics alleged it used that same positioning to direct minority franchisees toward the least profitable corners of the empire, while collecting the same cut. The lawsuit was eventually settled. Terms were not disclosed. McDonald's released a statement affirming its commitment to diversity. No publicly mandated structural changes to franchise placement followed. The question it raised about who gets the good locations and why was never publicly answered. The business model wasn't the only thing engineered at McDonald's. The food was engineered too. And this isn't a conspiracy. It's just how modern processed food works. McDonald's did it earlier and at larger scale than almost anyone else. Food scientists use the term bliss point. It describes the precise combination of salt, sugar, and fat that maximizes pleasure while reducing the feeling of fullness. Here's what that looks like in practice at McDonald's. A single Big Mac contains 1,010 milligrams of sodium, nearly half the recommended daily limit in one sandwich. A large order of fries adds another 400 milligrams. Eat both, and you've cleared 70% of your daily sodium before you've touched your drink. The fries are salted to hit fast. The sauces are sweet enough to keep pulling you back. The burger lands with just enough fat to feel satisfying before your body has time to say, enough. Nutrition is clearly not the primary design goal. The system is built around return visits. McDonald's has been legally challenged on the gap between advertising and reality in multiple countries. They've largely won because the phrase "serving suggestion" carries a surprising amount of legal weight. The food looks irresistible in ads. It's designed to taste irresistible in your mouth. Not because McDonald's is passionate about food, but because repeat visits are how the rent gets paid. The most calculated part of McDonald's strategy wasn't the real estate. It wasn't the food engineering. It was something that sounds almost too obvious once you see it. Children. McDonald's introduced Ronald McDonald in 1963. The Happy Meal launched in 1979. Today, McDonald's distributes approximately 1.5 billion Happy Meal toys every single year, making it, by volume, one of the largest toy distributors on the planet. Every toy exists for one reason: to get a child to ask for a Happy Meal. And research found that before a child could read a menu, they could already recognize the golden arches from the back seat of a car. The goal wasn't just to entertain children. It was to build emotional familiarity with the brand before children were old enough to understand what persuasion is, before they could question what they were being sold. McDonald's understood something early. Brand loyalty built at age 4 tends to last a very long time. Multiple countries moved to ban toy-in-meal marketing aimed at children. San Francisco sought to restrict Happy Meal toys in meals exceeding calorie thresholds. Health organizations worldwide pointed to McDonald's as a leading example of marketing that steered children toward food exceeding every recommended nutritional guideline for their age group. McDonald's lobbied against virtually every one of those measures. Ronald McDonald wasn't created because McDonald's loves kids. Ronald worked because children influence family spending, and McDonald's understood that early and built around it. The character wasn't just a mascot. It was a way of turning children into future customers as early as possible. By the early 2000s, the pressure had reached a breaking point. Supersize Me, fast food nation, obesity lawsuits. McDonald's was in the middle of all of it, and it faced the same decision every large company eventually faces: change the product or change the story. In 2003, McDonald's quietly discontinued the supersize option. No press conference, no health announcement, just removed. That same year, they launched Go Active Happy Meals, salad options, a pedometer. Media coverage was warm, but internal sales data and analyst reports at the time estimated salads represented just 2 to 3% of total U.S. orders, even at their peak. The other 97% unchanged. The salad was not the point. The salad was the headline. McDonald's needed one sentence in every health article. McDonald's now offers healthier options. They got it. The Big Mac, the Quarter Pounder, the large fries, unchanged, driving the overwhelming majority of revenue, exactly as before. To be fair, menu transparency is better than none. But transparency is not the same thing as transformation. In 2012, McDonald's added calorie counts to menus before being legally required to in the U.S. They framed it as a transparency initiative. The calories didn't change. The portions didn't change. What changed was the legal defense. We disclosed it. It was on the board. You chose it. When you look at it over time, the pattern is consistent. Criticism builds. Release something visible. Generate coverage. Reference it in every legal and regulatory challenge. Change nothing in the core product. It's not a health strategy. It's reputation management with garnish. We've covered franchisees, customers, now the people who actually staff the restaurants every day. For millions of people, McDonald's is not a symbol. It's just where the paycheck comes from. And what happened to that paycheck became a public finance issue, not just a labor one. In 2013, the University of California, Berkeley Labor Center published a study. Its finding: the fast food industry's low wages cost U.S. taxpayers approximately $7 billion per year in public assistance. McDonald's workers alone accounted for an estimated $1.2 billion of that annually. Food stamps, Medicaid, housing support, publicly funded, because the wages weren't enough to live on. Critics argue the system allowed McDonald's and its franchise network to hold labor costs low, while part of the survival burden shifted onto public assistance programs funded by taxpayers. At some point, we can't afford higher wages starts to look a lot like we chose not to pay them. The fight for 15, the push for a $15 minimum wage, was driven in large part by fast food workers, with McDonald's employees at its center. McDonald's response: fund lobbying efforts to slow wage legislation and publicly pilot automated ordering kiosks. The implication was clear: push for higher wages, and the position becomes easier to automate away. A company generating $112 billion in system-wide sales in 2022 alone, arguing that a living wage isn't financially viable. At that scale, it becomes hard to frame that as only a financial constraint. It also reflects a strategic choice about who absorbs the cost, a choice made repeatedly over decades. Here's a question almost nobody asks about McDonald's. Where does the food come from? Not the kitchen. Before the kitchen. The real story starts long before the restaurant, and one fact makes the scale immediately concrete. McDonald's purchases approximately 3.4 billion pounds of potatoes every year. That's roughly 7% of the entire U.S. potato crop, bought by a single company for a single menu item. And when McDonald's changed the size of its chicken nuggets in the 1990s, it reshaped chicken farming operations across multiple continents. One menu decision. Entire industries had to adapt. This means McDonald's suppliers don't just work with McDonald's. They depend on McDonald's. When McDonald's pushes for lower prices, which it does routinely, suppliers face a simple calculation: absorb the margin cut or lose the contract. For many of them, losing the contract isn't survivable. Environmental organizations have documented the footprint of McDonald's beef supply chain for years. Cattle ranching for McDonald's suppliers has been linked to Amazon deforestation. McDonald's has issued sustainability pledges and set emissions targets, but auditors consistently note that verification further down the chain, especially for indirect suppliers, remains difficult to enforce. McDonald's has the purchasing power to reshape global farming, to influence animal welfare standards, to shift how entire agricultural sectors operate. It applies that power almost entirely toward one objective: keeping input costs as low as possible. At that scale, calling McDonald's a restaurant company is only part of the truth. Now, I want to address something directly, because every time McDonald's faces serious scrutiny, the conversation eventually lands on Ronald McDonald House, and I want to be precise about what I'm saying here, and what I'm not. Ronald McDonald House Charities operates in over 60 countries. It has supported more than 10 million families since its founding in 1974. On any given night, roughly 52,000 families are staying in a Ronald McDonald House. close to the hospital where their child is being treated. The care it provides is real. The families it helps are not part of any corporate calculation. To be clear, this is not a criticism of the charity, the families it serves, or the people who work there. It's an observation about how companies can use genuine good work as cover against scrutiny in other areas. Because McDonald's has benefited from that positioning for years. When labor criticism builds, the charity appears. When a health story runs, the charity appears. When an environmental report drops, the charity appears. When a company ties its brand tightly to genuine humanitarian work, it creates an emotional buffer that makes other criticism harder to hold. You can't question the company without feeling like you're questioning the families. McDonald's has benefited from that dynamic for decades. Ronald McDonald House does valuable, real work. And the next time it comes up in a conversation about McDonald's corporate behavior, understand what's also happening. You're watching one of the company's best image protection tools do exactly what it was built to do. McDonald's influence doesn't stop at the restaurant. It reaches into the laws that govern the restaurant. Not through anything illegal. Through something more durable than that. In 2023 alone, the National Restaurant Association spent $2.5 million on federal lobbying. McDonald's spent an additional $1.8 million of its own, on top of whatever it contributed through the association. The targets, minimum wage legislation, food labeling requirements, nutritional disclosure mandates, worker classification rules. Every time a labeling law stalls, every time a wage increase is delayed, every time a city loses the ability to set stronger local standards, the existing business model gets protected. None of this is illegal. It's entirely within the rules. But those rules were partly shaped by the same industry that operates inside them. The federal minimum wage hasn't kept pace with productivity for decades. That didn't happen by accident or by inertia alone. When cities started passing local minimum wage increases, the industry lobbied state governments for preemption laws, legislation blocking cities from setting wages above the state floor. Workers in cities who voted for higher wages had those votes overridden at the state level, funded in part by industry money. McDonald's doesn't just operate within the political system. It shapes the conditions the system produces, the wages that haven't risen, the labels that don't appear, the regulations that don't exist. These are outcomes the industry has spent decades working to preserve. Here's the single fact that does the most damage to McDonald's standard defense of itself. Because McDonald's always says, we operate within local conditions, we follow local law. What follows makes that very hard to accept at face value. In the United States, a McDonald's crew worker typically earns between $11 and $14 per hour. In Denmark, the same role pays approximately $22 per hour, nearly double, under a union contract McDonald's agreed to. Those Danish locations are profitable. For comparison, the U.S. federal minimum wage has sat at $7.25 per hour since 2009, the longest stretch without an increase in history. If $22 an hour is viable in Denmark, the argument that it's impossible in the United States becomes very hard to sustain. McDonald's answer: different markets, different conditions. A more precise reading. In many cases, the difference is not voluntary improvement, it's regulatory pressure. The local conditions argument sounds reasonable, until you consider that local conditions are partly what sustained lobbying creates. The regulatory environment in the U.S. that allows lower wages and lower nutritional standards wasn't inevitable. It reflects decades of industry spending to keep it that way. The arches look the same everywhere. What sits behind them varies significantly depending on what the rules in that country actually require. The difference is what happens when regulation has teeth. After everything we've covered, you might still be asking, why does any of this matter? People know fast food isn't perfect. Why does McDonald's specifically keep growing? Here's why. And it might be the most unsettling part of all of this. Picture this. You're in an airport at 10:40 p.m. Everything else is closed. Or you're driving through a rural town with one lit sign on the highway. Or you're in a hospital cafeteria with almost no other options. And there it is. Again. Research has found that over 19 million Americans live in food deserts, areas with limited access to affordable, nutritious food. In many of those communities, the most accessible and affordable option with consistent hours is a fast food chain. And in the U.S., no chain has more locations than McDonald's. McDonald's strategy, applied over decades, hasn't just been to become the preferred restaurant. It's been to become the one that's there, by placing itself where competitors can't survive. Highway exits, food deserts, captive venues, and pricing below what any independent restaurant can match at scale. Only a company with its land leverage and procurement volume can hold that. And here's the trap. You can understand everything in this video. The real estate model, the franchise design, the food engineering, the lobbying, the wage structure, and still find yourself in a McDonald's at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. Because it's there, it's open, it's affordable, and nothing else is. The strategy worked because, in a lot of places, there's nothing else to choose. Not the best, not the most loved, just the one that's there. So embedded in daily life that opting out requires more time, more money, and more access than most people have. That's where 70 years of this strategy leads. So here's where we land. I'm not going to tell you McDonald's is uniquely evil. That would be too easy, and it would miss what's actually interesting about this company. McDonald's isn't uniquely bad. It's unusually legible, if you know how to read it. $112 billion in system-wide sales in 2022. $39 billion in real estate on the balance sheet. 40,000 locations across more than 100 countries. And 69 million customers walking through the door every single day. Built not on the best food, built on the most durable system, because McDonald's understood something most companies never figure out. The product is not what you sell. The story is what you sell. And the story McDonald's has told for 70 years, of families, value, community, the American dream, is the most successful commercial narrative ever built around a 500-calorie sandwich. The important gap here isn't about good versus bad. It's between the story McDonald's sells and the structure underneath it. A restaurant on the surface, a real estate machine underneath, a franchise sold as independence, a system built on control, a friendly public image, a business model built to extract at every layer, while keeping that extraction invisible. The golden arches are not just a logo. They're the entrance to a machine, built to pull value from workers, franchisees, suppliers, and customers, while covering that extraction with a story about family, value, and convenience. You thought you were walking into a restaurant. Now you know what you were actually inside. If this video reframed something you thought you already understood, hit subscribe. Every week, we take a company with a clean public face and show you what the structure actually looks like.